Now, President Muhammadu Buhari on Tuesday called for international cooperation and material supports for his administration's prosecution on the war against corruption and asset recovery. Well, the president, who made this call while delivering a speech during the general debate of the 72nd session of the United Nations General Assembly in New York, said institutions in the country are being strengthened to promote accountability and curtail corruption. Joining me here in the studio to discuss this is Team Ayoola Abiodun as the President's World Changers International. Tim, it's good to have you on the news at this time.
Thank you.
So tell us what you make of the President's call. Where do you think he'll need support in his anti-graft campaign from the international community?
Basically, Nigeria is, we are very strategic when you look at Africa as a whole, the continent. A couple of weeks ago, I was discussing with some diplomats in Switzerland, and I was amazed at the interest these people have in Nigeria, and primarily the subject of the topic, which they continuously ask me questions on: how do we intend to curb corruption? Because we can't hide. The world knows the monumental, the level of corruption in this country. Basically, talking about the level of support the president is going to gain or get is going to be unprecedented. Because as I speak with you, I was having a conversation with someone yesterday from Geneva, and he was asking me certain questions. If you said the world is not interested about Nigeria or whatsoever, it's about the negative news, it's about whatever, it's a lie. They are very concerned about the level of corruption, especially in Nigeria. Because take it or leave it, you can think Nigeria is not giant of Africa or whatsoever. It's when you go out there and interact with people, you will get to understand the strategic role Nigeria plays in the Committee of Nations.
But I'm wondering how many more analysts would share your optimism in the amount of support the international community can give Nigeria, because it's one thing to indicate concern, it's another thing to be practical, you know, in your approach to it. For instance, trillions, you know, of naira is still in banks in the UK and what have you. But here is a country whose former prime minister once called the same country fantastically corrupt. So how do you now put approach and decisions and actions together in supporting a country like Nigeria to fight corruption?
Let me tell you something. We can't win this completely at this point, because especially the vice president said something the other time that it costs a lot to track, especially looted funds. Much more effort to be put in place to checkmate, you know, the current the situation.
Talking about support, that's my point. Talking about support, isn't it the duty of those countries to bring out the details and say this is what you have
already
here?
We have the support, because if they are not willing to give the support, for instance, the former Prime Minister of Britain you spoke about, who mentioned how fantastically corrupt we are, they will not be talking about it. Number one is concern first. What you're not concerned about is not going to change. So
they're not to talk about it and not return our monies?
They will return it. It's going to be a process. The money stolen by the looted during the Abacha regime was the funds were repatriated. These things is not a rocket science thing. It won't happen overnight. You know, it's a process. You can't just get the product without going through the process. So, you know, we want something, especially in Nigeria, we want, bam, we want a magic, things to happen magically. This money was stolen in a period of time, and you can't expect this money to be returned overnight.
Let's make it practical and put it into perspective. What sort of processes are you looking at now? This is a situation that occurred like decades ago. What sort of processes are you looking forward to before we actually see the realization of the monies returned?
Well, first of all, the current government, the current administration has already initiated the process. The president called for support. In the past, you know, not much was said about stolen funds or fund taken abroad and all that. The process already started. We've already initiated the process. I don't think there's going to be much. There was a meeting, there was a panel set up the other time. They went to United Arab Emirates. A lot of funds was discovered that has been looted, and they've signed on the return of the president from his medical trip. I think there was an agreement that was signed and all that. But basically, let me also come back to this. In as much much as we're advocating for return of the stolen fund to be repatriated and all that, and we're asking for support, I think back home we also need to change our attitude,
right,
and get things done right. Because basically, if you've been entrusted with public fund and you're converting it for private gain, I think we need to start dealing with this first of all before we start going abroad.
That would be my next thrust before we call it a wrap on this interview. Calling for international support, how timely is that? And is it believable that our institutions are really being strengthened in the country?
On the paper, let me be realistic with you. On paper and in speech, you look at it and the institution is being strengthened. But basically, I think you need to look at this. We need to build institutions, not putting stronger individuals in place and all that. If you go to some of these institutions, you still discover that there are certain lacunas and there are certain things that need to thoroughly put in place to checkmate this. Because I look at the National Assembly, look at the politicians, look at the civil servants, you go to the civil service, look at that, and let's be realistic with ourselves. Because if we lambast these politicians, civil servants, and all that, we should also talk to the masses, because how much does it cost to run an election in Nigeria? Somebody was telling me, a politician was telling me the other time that he borrowed 200 and something million naira just to run an election. When it is that expensive, you're putting in whooping billions of naira to run an election, to get elected. Won't you get return? Why is the offices, why are they attractive? Who are those collecting the money? We have not sincerely addressed the issue of corruption. We are just dancing around it. Because until we start changing our attitude as a people, and we honestly want to address the issue of corruption, want to put an end to it, because I fear for the future of this generation. Because basically everything is almost, the faith is being lost. There is no more patriotism. People are not patriotic. People are not concerned about what the future holds.
All right, let's leave it here for now and share your optimism that indeed things would get better, like you were saying earlier. Team Ayoola Abiodun, thank you very much for coming on the news.
Thank you so much for having me.